Song of welcoming, how good it is to be together, which is on page 10 in our prayer book.
Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. 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 Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad.
Shabbat Shalom. A few weeks ago at our Brotherhood Shabbat, Michael Weintraub gave a reading, a teaching about the tension on Shabbat between finding moments of peace and moments of disruption, of challenging our ideas, of dealing with difficult topics. And tonight is one of those nights where I want to bring us into a space of peace. I want to bring us into the calm of Shabbat, these 25 hours that we get to rest and rejuvenate ourselves, and also to use this time to educate and to challenge ourselves with the difficult stories of our past, and to think about the present moments that we are in and what it calls upon us to do. And we're very pleased tonight to have our guest speaker, David Waluka, one of the founders of the Novi Dwar Memorial, who will speak with us after services tonight in honor of Yom HaShoah. And on Wednesday night, many of us took the time to light a Yizkor candle, a memorial candle, in honor of the 6 million souls whose lives were lost in the Shoah and in the Holocaust. And as I lit that candle, which for us was a gift of the Brotherhood, it was amazing to watch it all night, to sit with it, and then to wake up the next day with that reminder of all the precious people whose lives were not able to be lived out, whose dreams weren't able to be fulfilled, but who did what they could to bring their light into the world while they were alive, and to be reminded of the obligation that we have to continue to lift up the stories, to share them with our next generation, and to make sure that people never forget. And so tonight I want to light the Shabbat candles, which help us bring in that peace and that calm, but also be reminded of that light that many of us reflected on Wednesday night and all that was lost during the Shoah. And I invite you to join me on page 2 for candle lighting, and we'll transition into welcoming in those angels of Shabbat with Shalom Aleichem on page 24.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel shama.
Shabbat Shalom. We turn to page 24.
Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem l'shalom, Malchei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Marchuni l'shalom, Malchei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seichem l'shalom, Malchei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon.
We welcome all guests to TOS, virtual, in person, but especially the Shabbat Queen, the Shabbat Bride. And we invite the Shabbat Queen to join us with Lecha Dodi on page 20. This is a moment of mystical union that the Kabbalists imagined, connecting our earthly selves with our heavenly partners in a sense of peace and divine connection. We'll sing together verses 1, 2, 5, and 9. And as we reach that 9th stanza, I invite you to rise and turn to the door to greet the Shabbat Bride.
Yilalalai lecha dodi, Yilalalai likrat kala, Yilalalai b'nei Shabbat, b'nei Shabbat nekabla, Yilalalai lecha dodi, Yilalalai likrat kala, Yilalalai b'nei Shabbat, b'nei Shabbat nekabla. Shamor v'zachor miribo echad, Ishmihanu el hamiuchad, Adonai echad, Shmo echad L'shem hu tiferet V'litchilah Yailadai Yailadai l'chadodiu Yailadai likrat kalah Yailadai b'nei Shabbat B'nei Shabbat nekablah Likrat Shabbat Lechu v'nelcha Ki mekor habracha Mehosh mikedem nesucha Sof ma'aseh b'machshava Tefilah Yailadai l'chadodiu Yailadai likrat kalah Yailadai b'nei Shabbat B'nei Shabbat nekablah Itoreri Kiva over Kumi uri Shedaveri Yehovah Adonai Alayich nigla Yailalai l'chadodiu Yailalai likrat kalah Yailalai b'nei Shabbat B'nei Shabbat nekablah Moi v'shalom Ateret balah גם בשמחה ובזולה תוך אמוני אמסלה בואי חלה בואי חלה Kalah Yailalai b'nei Shabbat B'nei Shabbat nekablah Yailalai l'chadodiu Yailalai likrat kalah Yailalai b'nei Shabbat B'nei Shabbat nekablah
Turn to page 22 for our Psalm of Shabbat, and we sing together words in the middle of the page. You're welcome to turn to page 342 in the back if you'd like to have that verse pulled out. Ma gadlu ma'asechaya. We think about the awesome and wondrous things we experienced this week that we're bringing with us into Shabbat.
Sing with us. Hallelujah. 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 One more time. Hallelujah. Sing it out. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Magadlu, Magadlu, Masechaya, Meyotam Kumakshevo Teha, Magadlu, Masechaya. Please sing any part you like. Magadlu, Masechaya, Meyoram Kumachvo Techa. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
We turn to page 28 for the Baruch Hu, the call to worship, and we rise as we are able.
I can do it.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. We're welcome to be seated. We continue at the bottom of page 30, giving thanks for the cycles of nature and creation and the divine who brings on the evening light. Umavir yom umevi laila, umavdil ben yom uvein laila, Adonai tzvaot shemo, el chai v'kayam, tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed, Baruch ata Adonai, ha'ma'ariv aravim. The top of page 32, we remind ourselves of God's infinite love for us with Ahavat Olam.
Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael Mishpatim Otanu limadta Otanu limadta Alkein Adonai Eloheinu b'shachmeinu Uvkumheinu Nasiach behukecha V'nismach b'divrei Toratecha U'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed Ki hem chayenu Ve'orech yameinu Laila, Negeyom Laila, Ve'ahavatcha tasir Mimenu le'olamim Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael, Ohev Amo Yisrael.
We join together on page 34 for the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kivon Malchuto Leolam Vaed. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha v'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibartam ba'am v'shivtecha v'leitecha u'lechtecha b'derech u'shochbecha u'kumecha u'kshartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha u'chtavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'visharecha leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'yitem kedoshim lelohechem Ani Adonai Elohechem Asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim v'hiyot lachem le'elohim Ani Adonai Elohechem Adonai Elohechem Emet. With the Passover story still ringing in our ears from our seders, and perhaps the taste of matzah still in our mouths from this morning, even perhaps, if you're working through your 5 boxes.
Yes.
We turn
Absolutely.
to Mi Chamocha on page 40 to sing our ancestors' song of redemption, their song of joy.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha netar b'kodesh, norat hilot osefel, norat hilot osefel, malchutecha, malchutecha, ra'u banecha, בוקע על ים, לפני משה ולמרים, זלי זלי ענו ויאמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. We ask for our people's protection, both here, around the world, and especially in Jerusalem. And we sing together Hashkivenu on page 42.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Shalom V'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Shalom V'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim Ushmor tzedkeinu Eloheinu shalom ve'hamidenu shomreinu lechaim hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu shalom ve'hamidenu shomreinu lechaim.
The Amidah offers us the opportunity to bring our most personal and intimate prayers to God. I'm going to lead us in the opening blessings and invite you to take your own time, either with the words on the page or the words on your heart. And we'll join together for a prayer for peace at the end, Oseh Shalom. Please rise as you're able as we turn to page 46, and you're welcome to be seated when you complete your own prayers. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei Hakol V'Zocher Chastei Avot V'Imaot U'Mevi Geula Libnei B'neihem Leman Shemo B'Yahava Melech Ozer Moshiach U'Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Abraham Ezrat Sarah Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechayei Hakol Atah Rav Le'Oshia Morid Atah Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed Mechayei Hakol Berachamim Rabim Somech Noflim Verofech Olim Umatir Asurim Umekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar Michamocha Bal Gevurot Umidom Melach Melech Mimit Umechayeh Umasmiach Yeshua V'ne'eman atah l'hachayot hakol Baruch atah Adonai Mechayei hakol Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh U'kadoshim v'chol yom ya'alu chasela Baruch atah Adonai Ha'el hakadosh.
Shalom Bimroma Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel Ve'imru Amen. Say Shalom Bimroma Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel Ve'imru Amen. Yalale Yalale Shalom Bimroma Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel Ve'imru
Pause tonight to offer a prayer of healing for our friends, for our loved ones, and our community members who are in need of healing of body and of mind and of spirit. Anybody here would like to share the names of people, please raise your hand and share them with us. And if you're on Zoom, please add them into the chat to be read out loud. Karen?
Naomi Fisher and John Sillington.
Thank you. Spence? Thank you. David? Thank you. Catherine? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. As a community tonight, we add the names of Kenneth Greenberg, Naomi Batsapora Yosef, John Symington, Stephen Maya Norton and her family, Karen Weber, Esther Tzvia Bat Nachama, Stacy Kohler, Chaim Mesha, Dahlia Bat Miriam, Dina Rachel Bat Aryeh Vigalia, Cassandra Warshawski, Chaya Blaima Bat Chaim Chia Vasilia Ruchel, Jeffrey Colt, Joseph Siegel, Yosef Ben Herschel Verut, Glenna Bub, Liesel, Allen, Jerry, and Susan, Palma Spunt, Harriet Boynton, Ken Waller, and Steve Frown. For all those mentioned and all those in our hearts, we offer this prayer of healing on page 253.
Mishebeira Avotenu Mekor Abracha Leimhotenu. May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Lema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. And let us say, and let us say, Amen.
We pray for refuah shlema, complete and speedy recovery. We turn to page 282 in our prayer book for Elenu. I invite you to rise as you're able, and we'll join together at the top of page 282 and continue on with page 287. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, lateit gedula liotzer breshit, shehunote shamayim veyosed haaretz, umoshav yikaro bashamayim ima'al, ushchina tuzo begofei meromim, hu Eloheinu einod, ve'anachnu korim, umishtachavim umodim, Lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu v'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. We're welcome to be seated. We turn to Mourner's Kaddish on page 294. And if there's anybody here who's in a period of Shiva or Shloshim or marking the yahrzeit of a loved one and would like to add their name, please raise your hand. Thank you. May their memories be a blessing. May his memory be a blessing. Thank you. May their memories be a blessing. We add the name of Elaine Radis. And our list of yahrzeits is available. And tonight, as we commemorate Yom HaShoah v'Hagavura, I want to bring into the room those 6 million Jewish souls who lost their life in the Holocaust. That second part of, we don't often say when we talk about Yom HaShoah, is about those who resisted and those who fought back. And in the message that we sent out to our community to light that Yizkor candle, we brought into people's consciousness Hannah Senesh, who was one of those young people who left the relative safety of Israel to go back and to fight for her people, and who gave her life. And there were many who fought back and who resisted. And we bring all their memories into this room tonight to say Kaddish for them. I invite everybody to rise as we turn to page 294 for Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah, v'yalma divra chirutei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'vyomechon, u'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, v'agala u'bizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah merach le'olam u'lamei amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shmei dekudsha berechu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Damiran b'yalma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mramav. Hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zichrona livracha, may their memories be a blessing. We're welcome to be seated. So grateful that everybody could be with us tonight in person and joining us virtually, especially our young folks It's so important to get to hear these stories and tell them and to pass them on, and I'm grateful you guys came out on a Friday night to be with us. It's my pleasure to welcome up David Waluka, the founder of the Novi Dwar Memorial, to share his family story, his personal story with us this evening, and it is so inspiring to hear about what you have done to raise up the memory of your father and his siblings who aren't here to tell that story, and also to combat anti-Semitism and to make sure that the people of Poland are participating in the work of making sure that this never happens again. David?
Thank you, Rabbi. Oh, my heavens.
He's going to adjust it.
Thank you, Josh. That's better? That's better. So while I'm setting up, which will take a few minutes, first of all, I want to thank Shari for initiating this with Rabbi Dan. Shari's sister, Jody, was our daughter Jordana's best friend, still is her best friend, and was sort of our second daughter. And so I'm glad you initiated this. It was wonderful to meet Rabbi Dan and Josh here today, and to do this. We have all kinds of technology going on here, so let's hope it all comes together. I've been doing talks like this, and they change every time. This one, I had to change even more because I wanted to weave some of Ukraine into it. And most often I give this talk to young people. I've done it at the Polish Embassy in DC. I've done it at the Holocaust Museum. I'm a Boston University alum, and prior to COVID, I was giving a talk similar to this to the incoming sociology class. Oh yes, that's the wrong pin. Okay.
Went into the Auschwitz into labor camp.
We got here to Auschwitz, we got into the hospital ward, and we don't know what they're going to do with us. So they took me.
Let me get this guy going. Okay, so let's see if I can go back. That's going forward. Okay, we're not up there. As usual, an unknown error occurred. I've been doing this for a long time, and it's never the same each time we do it. And I will tell you that one quick story, the last time I did it at BU, there was a young Maori girl who came up to me afterwards with tears and saying, what they did to your people, they did to my people. And you hear these stories over and over again. What? I haven't touched anything. I'm going to get up here only so I can read. My memory isn't that great anymore, so I need something to remind me of what I'm doing. That was it? No. Aha. Shane Good. So this cartoon that was in the Sunday Globe by Wiley has this series called Non Sequitur. This one's about 10 years old, and I stole it and used it, and it really has a deep, deep meaning in it. And I don't know if he's Jewish or he has any connection to the Holocaust, but he certainly made a point where the young girl sees the numbers on the old man and says, "What a lousy tattoo you have." And he says, "I have it as a reminder, and a reminder of other days." And he talks about the Holocaust. And her last terms are, "So you kept it to remind yourself about the dangers of political extremism." He says, "No, my dear, I kept it to remind you." And that's the purpose behind everything that I'm doing. It's young people who are going to be our way out of this. So let me start. Good Shabbos. I can't emphasize enough how pleased I am to be here, and thank you, Rabbi and Shari and Josh, for helping make this happen. I'm David Waluka. I'm here with my wife, Nancy, our granddaughter, Jaden, and her friend. See, my mind went blank. Bella, thank you. Our daughter Jordana couldn't be here, and our grandson Zachary is working. He's over at Newton Wellesley, so he couldn't make it here either. Both Jaden and Zachary have been to Auschwitz with us. They've been to Poland. And I remember one time, I think you told me, Jaden, that in school you said, doing the Holocaust, you said, "I've been there," and they didn't believe her. How can a 12-year-old or 11-year-old do that? I have partners. This isn't something that I did by myself, and you'll get some of the history later. But the two partners are Dr. Zev Shaked. He's in San Antonio right now. And then my cousin Zvika Plachinsky, who's in Gedera, Israel. And Zev and his brother Joseph, who lived in Tel Aviv and just passed about 3 months ago, unfortunately. The four of us were the ones who sort of got this going. Once my father, who was the progenitor, it was my father's desire to go back that started all of this. I could use many hours, but we don't have that this Shabbat. I want to sort of relate what we're the story to today and our lives and who we are. Whether you're young, you're old, Jewish or not, you're committed to what we're doing. Change is a given. I'm a planner by trade, and you go into the towns, we don't want any change. And you've got two options. You do nothing, and something is going to happen. If you like it, leave it alone. If you don't like it, make a change. You can't do nothing in this world. You can see what doing nothing is doing right now. It's tearing us apart. Those who need to speak up are not speaking up. Those who need to offset what's going on are not doing what they should be doing. In July of 2011, Nancy, Zachary, and I traveled to Novi, Dwar, just outside of Warsaw. It's sort of like Sharon is to Boston. They even have commuter rail now. It's a commuting suburb of Warsaw. To dedicate the first phase of the restoration of the Jewish cemetery that had been destroyed by the Nazis in the Holocaust. Let's see if this works. Sure. No? Nope. This guy doesn't want to work.
It's working.
Oh, maybe I'm too far away.
No, it's working. Windows and Zoom.
Oh, it's because it's Zoom. Well, if you don't mind going to the next slide, can you do that?
Yes.
Okay. It's nice to have a canto. There we go. Okay, that can stay there for the moment. That was an amazing and life-changing journey for us all, but it was not the end. It was the beginning of a journey that continues to this day. We've been back several times, and last year we were supposed to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the dedication of the restoration of the cemetery. Of course, COVID stopped that, and we were going to redo it this year, and a combination of COVID and Putin stopped that. So we hope to go again next year and renew this annual rededication of the cemetery with the wonderful people of Novi Dwar. A lot has happened in the decades since we dedicated this. All around us, I see younger generations standing up and speaking out and taking the lead, where my and the other older generations, let's face it, we failed. But we'll talk more about that later. As for the beginnings, this all started, as I said, with my dad. We've all read and seen movies and documentaries about the horrors, particularly this week of Shoah, of the Holocaust. Efforts continue to keep it from fading into history. For the deniers, there are few left, like my dad, who we lost to Alzheimer's 10 years ago. As witnesses, I've watched them pass one by one. You may know Izzy Arbeiter, who was the leader of the survivors movement here in eastern Massachusetts. He was at my bar mitzvah. He was at my wedding. He was at my son's bris. He was at every mitzvah we had. He just passed at 94. He would go back to Germany and testify. They actually did a film about him that was debuted about 5 years ago. He and my parents and the other new Americans were involved in the creation of the United States Holocaust Museum. If you look at the groundbreaking picture, my dad's there in the front row. They, as a group, were involved in the creation of the Holocaust program at Brandeis and the Holocaust Memorial. If you're up there, you see the statue. And they were involved in doing that, and they were also involved with Mayor Menino in the Holocaust Memorial here at City Hall Plaza. I'd like you to meet my dad, if technology will let me. Come on. He was always stubborn.
Give it another go.
Okay.
You're our first hybrid guest speaker, by the way. So this is also so thank you for bearing with us.
That's okay. Somehow it doesn't seem to be an honor. There we go.
Want to watch the video?
Yes, please. This was done for us by Boston University.
My father and his fellow survivors who were sort of the family that we grew up with didn't talk about the Holocaust. In '88, it was the 45th anniversary of the Warsaw Uprising, and my father never wanted to get involved. Coming back to Europe, decided he wanted to go. And I said, I'll go with you. So we booked the tour. We were walking through Auschwitz on the tour, and he just started talking to me. This is what I saw here, and this is what I saw there, and then we sort of had to be quiet for the tour guide. People stopped listening to the tour guide and were listening to him.
You see how the bags, how small it is? 2 people were sleeping on each. He hit me straight with the bat. Straight in here, split that, and broke 4 teeth. They were killing for nothing.
There was a young woman with us with her mom doing the same thing, and she was in the film business. And she said, we have to go back and tell your father's story separately. The next morning, there were 2 white Mercedes taxis waiting at the hotel, and we had a sound person and a videographer and a producer. They kept the tourists aside, so we'd had access to filming both in Auschwitz and Birkenau. And so we had the day.
We came here to Auschwitz. We saw the name Auschwitz. The brothers in cattle wagons, which their windows were covered up with barbed wire, and we opened the doors. Right away was a panic. The SS jumped outside. Raus, 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 raus. They took us out. Men's side, the women and children the other side. Left, right, left, left, right, left, left, right, just like that. We couldn't ask nobody where we're going, but the whole time they told us that the men still going to go to working camp, and the women going to go to housing, where we're going to see him every day. So we believed them.
They were shaved and stripped and tattooed. 83522, I'll never forget the number. And went into the Auschwitz, into labor camp.
We got here to Auschwitz, we got into the hospital block, and we don't know what they're going to do with us. So they took me, and they saw I have good blood, some kind of good blood, I didn't know about it, and they started taking blood from me. One day, the rooms were open, you know, so I went by, and I saw all my friends, they castrated. I was shocked. I'm here lady taking blood, it's not so bad, but they already all castrated, all of them.
In the film, someone asked him, to what do you attribute the fact that you survived? He said, I was lucky. I wasn't smart, and I wasn't brave. I was lucky.
When I came here, and I saw naked men, women, and children running straight to the barracks, I was surprised when I saw women and men together naked. I said, something is wrong, because I didn't know where my family went a week before. So now I saw where they went, and then I saw a big ditch and smoke and fire smell of meat and everything. Then I know where my family went, how she disappeared. And that was the end of my family.
Hearing the stories is one thing, being there is something else. When we lit candles at the blown-up crematories in Birkenau, when he stood in the crematory and I stood in the crematory, that was tremendously moving and powerful. He knew where the ash pit was, where they buried the ashes, and he went down there and he poked around with a spoon he'd brought, and he pulled out ashes and bones. And we put him in a plastic bag, and we were taking him back with us. He got terribly emotional. There's one scene where he has his hands on the barbed wire, and where he talks about the deniers.
There are a lot of people that say the crematorium never exists. Let them tell me that there wasn't crematoriums and there wasn't Auschwitz in Birkenau.
I think that's one of the reasons we wanted to make this film so badly, because when his generation is gone, there are no witnesses left. Having it put on film, having the story recorded was very cathartic for him.
My name is Isaac Waluka, and I'm very happy that I'm telling this story, not just for my kids, but the world should never forget what happened. Next to me is my oldest son, David. I was supposed to come by myself, and he wouldn't let me go by myself. He says, Dad, wherever you go, I go to. And I'm very proud of him.
What was amazing about that whole period was being there and being with him and listening to his experiences and his feelings about what went on. I guess it was cathartic for me as well.
But he'd stolen some potatoes. They were inside his shirt, and they caught him. The special blood that he had was AB negative, the rarest blood type. They bled him every week for the German soldiers. They didn't know they were getting Jewish blood. And he talked about not seeing his family. He was one of 8. My grandfather died, as you'll see, before the war. My grandmother died in the Warsaw ghetto. But he and 7 brothers and sisters went to Auschwitz. He was the only one that came out. He actually saw one of his brothers hanged. So this is, it's not the kind of stuff you can relate until you've been there. I mean, this could go for hours and hours. It's been cut very short, but we're walking by the gallows, and he said, this is where I stood, and there's what they hung him on the second one. It was really something. So, is that working? Yes. Here you see Novi Dwar. And as you see, it's just outside of Warsaw. It's about 25 miles from downtown, and it's in the Mazowiecki region. It's like Suffolk County, Norfolk County. It's like our counties. To the south, about a 4-hour drive, because we drove it, is Krakow, and next to Krakow is Auschwitz. You can also see the relationship between Novi Dwar and Warsaw and Belarus and Russia and the Ukraine. These are the Russian countries from which the Jewish populations first came to Poland in the 1700s. The map's also relevant today because you can see where the destruction is coming from to the Ukraine, from Belarus. Russia, of course, surrounds on the other side, and it goes on. Here are the stats. The first Jews came to Novi Dwar 256 years ago. That Jewish community was vibrant and an integral part of the larger community. They weren't separated. There wasn't a ghetto. They lived with everybody else. They were on the city council. They were a good part of the population. At one time, they held nearly 45% of the elected offices in Novi Dwar. Novi Dwar became the Jewish publishing center for Europe, not religious. Technical books and philosophical books. They had 3 different publishing houses. And they put out more than 10,000 books, pamphlets, and other publications. Wow, it's working. You know this story. It's not unique to Novi Dwar and the rest of Poland. Before the war, Novi Dwar was half Jewish. They've had Jewish city councilors, they had Jewish mayors, and the Jewish institutions, when Hitler came in, they closed the synagogues, the mikvahs, the schools. But this wasn't unique to Novi Dwar or to Poland. It was happening in Germany and Lithuania and Austria and wherever the Nazi machine was rolling. And now, of course, the Russia they came from is safer for the Ukrainians. The Russians, from where they came, was safer than Nazi Poland. In May of 1940, the ghetto was established and Jews were pressed into forced labor. In 1941, the Nazis performed the first selection in the ghetto, leaving only people who could work. The rest were sent to die at the nearby Pomihovic concentration camp. This is a very important thing because you tend to always think about Auschwitz and Birkenau and Majdanek. There were 1,000 camps, little ones, smaller ones, and not as well run. In November and December of 42, the ghetto was liquidated with the remaining Novi Dwar Jews transported to Auschwitz. My father and his 7 sisters and brothers were among them. He was the only survivor. He never saw them again, as he said, when they got off the trains and through the selections. He did see one of his brothers hanged. Of the 4,500 Jews of Novi Dwar at the beginning of 1939, there are only 400 that have known to have survived the Holocaust. As a child growing up, my parents, both Holocaust survivors, and you'll see my mother's story in a second, they didn't speak much about it. You'd ask them as a kid, and we don't want to talk about it. Around the time that I was 10, 11, getting towards bar mitzvah, they sort of came out. And I think it's because they were far enough away from it, and they felt safe enough, and they felt angry enough, and they were in a world where they felt they could do something about it. My dad was among a group of Auschwitz survivors called the Millionaires. Millionaires were people whose number was less than 1 million, 83522. So he was in for over 3 years, and for someone to survive that long was very, very rare. The AB negative blood kept him alive. My grandfather was a blacksmith. My father was strong and had hand skills. They actually taught him masonry skills at the camps, and he built some of the brick barracks. When we came to this country, he worked as a mason and did the Franklin Hill Projects, across from Franklin Field in Dorchester. He worked on there, and they fired him because he was working too fast. He was working fast because he's used to having a gun behind him. And if you work too slow, they shoot you. He then went to work for family, and we all turned out okay. My mother, who just died in August of 2018 from pancreatic cancer, unfortunately, was not in the camps, but her story is equally compelling. That's Mom. She was 13 years old in a town just north of Vilna, Podbrudge. And she was visiting her Catholic girlfriend on the farm next door, playing. While she was next door, the Nazis came, took her mother, father, and sister away. She never saw them again. And if she was home, I wouldn't be here. My mom lived with that family for 3 years, going to church. She learned catechism. She served the Nazi soldiers. They camped on the farm. She served them breakfast. Now, my mother, like my daughter, was blonde in those days. She didn't look Jewish. She would take the train into town. And she would take eggs and cigarettes and meat from the farm and sell it to the soldiers, just to make some money. At the end of the war, that family wanted to adopt her. She was grateful, but she was determined to find family who she learned were in Salzburg. Now she's 16. She made her way alone from Podbrudge to Salzburg, 900 plus miles by herself. Hitchhiked, got on a train. We never got the full story how she got there, but she got there. She met my father in a DP camp. He was an orphan, she was an orphan. They knew each other 3 days, and they got married. Her wedding present was a pair of red boots, and on their 50th anniversary, when my father was still sentient, Alzheimer's hadn't gotten him, we made them an anniversary, and my brothers and I had a pair of red boots made for her. Had she lived this past January, she would have been 93. I'll be 76. You guys do the math. I was bar mitzvahed with an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old brother. My mother was 29. This was Novi Dwar at the turn of the century. This is the central square, and it's still there. It's a beautiful park now, and it's where the soccer fields were. My father was an avid soccer player. He played left flegel. He was left wing for the plywood factory soccer team. Now, because he was too young to be on the team, they lied about his age to get him on the team. And we didn't know about that till his death. That carried through his whole life, the fact that he was 2 years older than he really was, all those years. As I mentioned, Novi Dwar had a rich history going back to the 1700s. You can't do this with a mask on. When we're there in '88, he wanted to go back home, and we're walking down the street, and we meet this guy, and they both start crying, and they start blabbering in Polish. I never learned Polish. When my parents, like the others, came to this country, they wanted to put that away. They only spoke English in front of us. Unless they didn't want us to hear what they said, then they spoke Polish, or they spoke Russian, or they spoke German, or they spoke Yiddish, just to get around it. So I asked him, what happened? He says, well, he was on the soccer team with me. And when they created the ghetto, he would come at night and throw food over the fence. One night he didn't come anymore. So he said, like the other Gentiles, they've forgotten about us. He learned here that he got caught by the Nazis. They sent him to a concentration camp for 6 months. When he got out, the ghetto had been evacuated. So we went to his house. He's a retired public works employee. We sat with his wife and his brother's wife and his brother, and they were singing school songs. And my father said, "I want to go see my grandfather's grave." He said, "No, you don't." So, my dad died before the war. I want to see his grave. You don't want to see his grave. So we went. And this is what we saw. When the Nazis did the last transport out, they then mined the cemetery. It's about a 5-acre cemetery. It was good gravel. They mined it with the caskets, and they took it, and it became concrete sand. There are still buildings in downtown Warsaw that have Jewish bones in the foundations. They took the headstones, which was a common practice when the Nazis were in Poland. They took the headstones out, and they lined the dirt roads with them to support the weight of the tanks and trucks, because the roads were very muddy. There were no paved roads in those days. This is not unique to this cemetery. They did similar things for many cemeteries in Poland. So we saw the graves that had been left open. They'd mined about 1.5 acres, 2 acres of the 5. So the top was still there, but they took the headstones and took all the concrete they could out. We saw the left open. We said Kaddish over them. We found a baby skull in an open grave. And we took it out and we put it with the bones that he got from the ash pits at Auschwitz. Getting through customs was very interesting because it's illegal to take that stuff out of the country. And we had a badge that said, the 45th anniversary and all that. And the Polish customs agent said, "Are you one of those coming for the..." And my father started crying. He said, "Go through." When we landed at Logan, they didn't open any of our luggage. They said, "Welcome home." They just let us through, the group that was from Boston. When we got home, come on. There we go. Sharon Memorial Park gave us a grave. My father's rabbi, who was Rabbi Korf from the Milton, B'nai Jacob in Milton, and our rabbi, Rabbi Dan Kaplan from Sharon, we had a service, just like you would for anyone who passed away. Keep pointing in the wrong direction and it's not going anywhere. Oh, wrong way. Here we go. And it has the same bronze plaque that everybody else has at Sharon Memorial Park. And it reads, "Here lie ashes and bones retrieved March 16th to 18th, 1988 from the concentration camps at Auschwitz, Birkenau, and Treblinka." We'd visited them all when we were there. "And the child of a skull found lying in an open grave in the desecrated Jewish cemetery in Novi, Dwar, brought here to rest." And it's over. It's not far from the entrance to the park. And since then, at least 2 other families have brought remnants back, bones back, and the park has given them the grave site. Come on. There we go. We came home determined to do something about it. Soon after, however, my dad had a massive coronary, quadruple bypass, then developed colon cancer, which he survived. But finally, Alzheimer's took him in 2001. And for a guy that went through all that he went through and survived, and all that he did for us, bringing 3 kids up and my mother in this country, taking care of us and taking care of a lot of other people, Alzheimer's was the most unfair thing at all. He didn't deserve it, but no one does. But the thought of doing something about it faded away. In 2009, Zev Shaked, he's a partner in a women's pharmaceutical company in Texas, was coming to Boston for a conference and found us. We picked him up, brought him to the house, Showed him some of these pictures. He said, I'm going to Berlin on business. I'm going to go back to Novi Dwar and see what's going on. He calls me from Novi Dwar and says, nothing has changed. 1988, 2009, nothing. There are 2 gypsy houses on the back of the cemetery. It still looks like it's no man's land. So he got his brother, Joseph, Tel Aviv, to come. The 2 of them speak fluent Polish. I don't. They spoke to the city. The city recognized it as a cemetery. We created a 501c3, and the goal was simply put a fence around it, stop the desecration. The mayor actually evicted the gypsies and tore the houses down. And so we started. We found a local contractor who still works for us, who did the work at dead cost. The fence was about $40,000. We raised the $40,000 and started to work on getting the fence done. At the same time that we were in there, we were in the city, we found, okay, here we go, that all the Jewish records, the handwritten records, were not in City Hall. They were in the county municipal building, and they had been untouched. These are handwritten records going back hundreds of years. Births, deaths, marriages, bar mitzvahs, all in there. We found these that have the Waluka name in them, and the Kielacek, that's Zev's name. So far we've traced our family back to 1832, and others go back further. What's interesting, before 1900, it's in Russian, and after 1900, it's in Polish. We've taken a lot of this stuff, and we have digitized it, and so people can do searches now on our website for a small donation. I've been to and worked with the Holocaust Museum, the United States and Yad Vashem both, and offered to give it to them. They can have it all, just digitize it, make it accessible. So, we were beginning with the fence. I'll try this again. Here we go. And we're going to fill the hole in. And Rabbi Michael Shudrick, who's still the Grand Rabbi of Poland and in charge of all the cemeteries, got involved with us. And they were building this, the Jewish Museum in Warsaw, not a Holocaust museum. And it's beautiful. That's what it looks like when we visited it last. They gave us the dirt from the hole from the museum. They trucked it the 25 miles to Novi Dwar to try to fill the hole in. This was, first picture is 2011, this was 2014. And if you go to Warsaw, you must see it. They have a wooden synagogue inside, totally reconstructed. It's gorgeous. And the history of the Jews going back as far as you can, with only a small room related to the Holocaust, because there is a separate Holocaust museum. So here we are building the fence. Top picture, the guy on the right is Joseph Kielacek. And you can see the hill in the back. You can see where the excavation stopped. So even the dirt from the Jewish Museum wasn't enough to make it. There was just too much needed. In April of 2010, a few weeks before the groundbreaking for the fence work, while the city was doing utility work, water work, sewer work, they found a headstone. They stopped. They came back with special equipment. Zev and Joseph were there because they were overseeing the fence construction. They put rubber grapples on some equipment and they pulled up the headstone. And on the lower left, that's Joseph on the left, Rabbi Shudrick. My friend Michael, who is the cell phone store guy there. They found 12 of them. They were buried 8 to 10 feet down, and they were beautiful. And Grabowski, the contractor, took them to his yard, power washed them, and put them on pallets so they wouldn't get damaged, because we didn't know what to do with them. They were beautiful. They were amazingly well preserved. The mayor said to us, now that we know that there are matzevot, he didn't say matzevot, headstones here, we'll be careful digging in the future. We said, thank you. We can't ask, she said, I'm not going to go digging up perfectly good streets looking for headstones. We said, as long as you're careful when you dig, we're very happy. And we thanked him profusely. Then things happened. Come on. There we go. So this is the dedication of the fence, the beginning of the fence. And there's Rabbi Shudrick, and these are the kids from the local middle school and high school who came. And the schools have gotten them, once they saw the headstones, the schools began to get involved, which was wonderful, and they still are to a great degree. You see Rabbi Shudrick walking up the hill, and you can see all the kids down below. Now, what happened here was that the ceremony was publicized. At that time, I had a long-term relationship with Barney Frank, and I was his liaison to the National Association of Realtors, and I'm Elizabeth Warren's right now, but we had I knew him when he was a driver for Kevin White. And so he said, I can't give you money, what can I do? You know, I'm a representative. He said, send a letter to the mayor saying thank you. That's all, just say thank you. So Barney got a letter signed by him and 4 other members of Congress. They read the letter here. It was picked up by Polish national television, and about 2 weeks later they were digging up the streets looking for my headstones. And we had 125 of them now. We couldn't put them back because back wasn't there anymore. And even if it was there, we didn't know which stones were where. There was no record. So Zev and I decided to display them on a wall, memorial wall, and we began working on doing that. Within a year, after another major funding effort, the wall and plaza around it was completed. And we went back for the dedication. But before we went back, I'd been to Auschwitz with my dad. We went back with my grandson Zach and Nancy. I said they had to go see, you have to see Auschwitz before you see this. You have to understand where it came from. So we went to Auschwitz. And it was similar to where it was with my dad. When I was there with my dad, he said, this is Disneyland compared to what it was. There was never any grass. It didn't look like this. It was filthy. Well, we went through. And here you see the double barbed wire fence, the electrical fence. My father would say to me, we'd get up in the morning to they'd shut the fence off to pull the bodies off. The people who were so despondent, they would run against the fence and kill themselves. Every morning they shut the fence off to take the bodies away. Here you see the kids that were taken into the camps. The fact that they had their pictures taken, because the Nazis were great record keepers, meant that they had a small chance of surviving. Although few did, because they had to do the same work as the adults. I told you why my dad was alive. Strong bricklaying skills, AB negative blood, which I have, by the way. Red Cross loves me. And below that is the wall of death on the left. That's next to the hospital barracks. That's where they would line them up. You see, I think you saw it in Schindler's List, among other things. They'd line them up 5 and 6 deep not to waste bullets. They'd shoot through everybody. That's where it happened. And then you see us going into the barracks, that was the medical barracks. And finally, this is the only crematory left. This is the little crematory. It's at Auschwitz. The big crematories, the one you saw in the video, are at Birkenau, the work camp about a mile away. And this is just the entrance to the gas chambers. This is one of the most profound pieces of what we're doing here. Those of you who have been to the Holocaust Museum have seen smaller versions of this. This is where those displays of shoes, prosthetics, pots and pans, combs, and hair, that's where that all came from here. Each of these rooms are about a quarter the size of this sanctuary, each of these. And they're full of shoes. That red shoe just sticks in my mind. Legs, canes, arms, hairbrushes, every suitcase was a person. And you look at them and you say, this is stuff. They said, no, it's not. Every one of these is a human being who doesn't exist anymore. You look at that pile of shoes, that's a pile of people. And that's the perspective that you really have to have. On the top left are the showers, gas chambers. This is where they dropped the Zyklon B gas in through the top. People died in minutes. And then there are the ovens. One of the things that kept my father alive is he was among the Sonderkommandos. Those are the people that took the bodies out of the ovens and retrieved the gold and whatever wasn't burnt. And it was staying alive. Lower left are one of the main crematories. The Nazis bombed them as they left, as they ran, to get rid of the evidence, which of course didn't happen. And then there's the ash pit. You can't go there today. We couldn't walk up to them today because they're now cordoned off and fenced off because too many people go there. My dad and I walked through them. You saw that in the video. We walked in there. Can't do it today. So we went back to Novi Dwar. And again, my family has been there for at least 170 years. And the city was wonderful. They were giving us historic tours. They did everything for us. The top left is what it looked like in 1988. The bottom right wasn't there in 88. In fact, when we went back in 14, that was the last original building in Novi Dwar, and it burnt down. So there is nothing left of the old town. My father took me to where the cheder was, to where the mikveh was, to where the school. They're all gone. We went that day to Fortress Number 3 at Pomihovek. Napoleon built a whole string of fortresses as he moved across Europe. This was built into a hill, and it was used to store munitions. It's about a 10-minute ride from Novi Dwar. This is one of the 1,000-plus little camps that were not organized, where they were just free to do whatever they wanted. They would shoot people, they would kill babies, they would put them in the winter. That tunnel you see, it was 90 degrees outside that day. You could see your breath 50 feet in, deep in the ground. And this is where people were killed for sport. You're aware of the 2018 Act of Institute of National Remembrance, that it's a crime to implicate the Poles in the Holocaust. It's still there now, by the way, even though we have good relations with them. No one took it off the books. And the historians that we heard clearly owned up and said, this is what we did, this is who we were. They would go to jail if they said that today. And unlike the Germans who owned up to it and changed their lives, the right-wing Polish government is making it a crime to imply that Poles could have been implicit. And, it's clear that they were. These was the dedication ceremonies. The city put on a program for us at the community center, kosher meal. There are about 100 of us. They came from the U.S., they came from the East Coast, the West Coast, from Florida. They came from Australia, they came from South Africa, they came from France and England to be here because they all had a connection to Novi Dwar. Professor Andrei Forajny gave us this history that was amazing. And then we had Avram Zhul, who came from Israel, who's 90 years old, who grew up in Novi Dwar. And he talked about his life there. And then we had the competition. We started in the schools a dialogue on tolerance essay contest in 2011. This was Bartov Cheda. He was our first winner. And when you read these, they're all online, it's incredible what young people can say when they put their minds to it and express their feelings. He made one final line that just burnt in my mind. Come on. Of course, it'll stay burnt in my mind. There we go. Now, he wrote that. We must know that xenophobia, bigotry, nationalism, and hostility towards all of the others are actions which sooner or later will lead every society to nothing. Are we living that in Texas? Are we living that in Florida? We're certainly living it in Ukraine. He's right. Now, he's 10 years older, but he's still right. There were 35 entrants that first year. We had over 300 last time, and we give them scholarships. He got $1,500. The school got $750. Second was $1,000. The school got $500. The third was $500, and the school got $250. And they've done it every single year since. This was the first time that I ever saw the monument for real. And I lost it there. These stones have been buried for 70 years. Grabowski did a marvelous job of putting them on the wall. I still can't figure out how he did it. You don't see bolts, you don't see anything. He did a wonderful, wonderful job. Great guy. But it was a profound moment for me. And we had the ceremonies. In addition to the wall, he built a staircase to the top, to the part of the cemetery that hadn't been mined. These are the first ceremonies coming in. The two guys in the front are security. They had serious security all around us. The city did it all. They set up the sound systems, the tables, the tents. They did it all for us. So here we are. That's my grandson Zach, who's now about 2 feet taller and lives not far away from us here. The commuter rail runs right alongside this. So every day, dozens of times, people see this as they ride by on the train. The staircase goes up to the top because we couldn't fill it in. And here you see what's left, an empty grave, a stone that didn't get taken. And that's me. I'm pouring ashes from the Auschwitz ash pit into the grave, sort of trying to return it to where it came from. These are Israelis looking for familiar names. We found one Waluka cousin. We found a midwife, it said so on the stone. And we found a brewmeister. This is the back of the wall. We had that many stones. And even the broken pieces ended up there. We believe there are about 600 more out there. In 2016, we borrowed and paid for ground-piercing radar looking for more and couldn't find them. We found one that was in the river, in the Wisla River, and it was just too far to tear. It wasn't even recognizable. You could just barely see what it was, but we brought it back. So these were the ceremonies for the first dedication. Zev opened it up. He thanked everybody in Polish and English. All the logistics were taken care of by the city. In addition, the school administrators, the children, and a whole slew of Novi Dwar citizens came and helped us and supported us through the whole thing. That's me on the left sort of saying thank you. I had one of the English teachers from the Polish school to be my translator. And then next to me is Michael Schweitzer, who was a member of Polish President Komorowski's cabinet, came and spoke about what he called a dedication that was a miracle. Remember, only 1 year ago, we hadn't seen the first headstone. There's Rabbi Shudrick, whose brother, by the way, is a cantor in New Bedford. And the year we were there, Red Sox had won the World Series. I brought him a Red Sox hat. He said, "Thanks very much, I'm a Celtics fan." So I called my brother and we sent them a Celtics hat. The rabbi said for the past decades, and up until now, a couple of years ago, this was one of the worst Jewish cemeteries. The conditions here were the worst. It was abandoned. Today, it is in the best condition, and he made a big deal out of the fact that it was the cooperation of the locals with us, dedicated to bringing it back. This is Ambassador Zvi Ravner, who was the Israeli ambassador to Poland. And he said, this is a new Poland, a free Poland based on democracy and a good friend of Israel. This is an amazing event. He said, I hear all the time when people come from Israel and the U.S., they come to me and they look at these cemeteries and they say, this is a terrible thing and someone has to do something about it. And then they go home and nothing happens. He said, this time someone did something about it and he couldn't be more proud. And I must comment here that the changes here in our country, your country, in recent years are being cloned across the world. The Polish government has moved towards right-wing nationalism. It's terrifying. And youth movements in this country, the youth movements in Poland, you even see the youth in Russia standing up. And that's the only hope that we're going to have. On the left is Bill Haidt, the chargé d'affaires for the U.S. Embassy. The ambassador was in Africa that week. He couldn't come, and he apologized. He wanted to come. And he said Novi Dwar has been around since the 13th century and has been beaten up by the Swedes, the French, the Prussians, the Russians, the Soviets, and the Nazis. It's been destroyed and rebuilt many times, bouncing back every time, this time, unfortunately, without its Jewish community. And that was sad. Joshua Kowalski, who is still the mayor of Novi Dwar. Yes. He said, while we cannot restore the vibrant Jewish community that existed here on the eve of World War II, we can honor the memory of those who built that community. And he is an integral part of building it and rebuilding it and vouchsafing it. We then had flower-laying ceremonies. The Israeli ambassador, the blue and white flag, you see the red, white, and blue, the kids from the schools. It was a dignified, honorific event, starting with my father and I looking at a hole in the ground. The upper part of the cemetery we left alone, except for cutting the grass. We wanted people to see what had happened. So the holes are still there. And while we're looking at this, it occurred to Zev and me that all those stones were people that died before the Holocaust. And there was nothing there for people who died in the Holocaust. You know, you've got yurtzeit walls here. There's no yurtzeit wall for the 4,000. So the first thing we did was put up a virtual yurtzeit wall on the website, which is there now. And my grandson Zach and Kasia Sosnaskar, our friend in Novi Dwar, who's now working with the Ukrainians, maintained the site and put it up. But we decided to do a real yurtzeit wall. And so once again, we started fundraising, and this is the centerpiece of the wall. It's in Polish, English, and Hebrew. This is Swedish granite. It says, the people who are remembered here were among the Jewish citizens of Novi Dwar who perished in the Holocaust. They have no graves. We honor their lives and bring them home to be with their families and friends once more. At the same time, one of our Novi Dwar survivors wanted to do a stone for his grandfather. And we had that made for him. In May of 1941, after Aaron Lieb Knecht buried 28 Jewish victims in the Jewish cemetery, a Gestapo soldier asked him, how many? He said, 28. Soldier shot him and said, well, now there's 29. This stands at the bottom of the staircase right now. This is the section, you can see the Waluka family, my aunts and uncles who no longer exist, my grandmother, my grandfather, and then the Plachinskys, who are my cousins. This is what it looks like. That's the right half of it. And here we are once again, ceremonies. Once again, dignitaries coming from Warsaw, from all countries. And you know, I think we've done something. I mean, people come who are not Jewish to see this, to try to understand it. Cemetery's locked, by the way. You can't get in there. You have to go to the city hall to get a key, then a guide has to bring you. You can't go by yourself. So once again, it was Bashert. They were digging the streets up again. They found some more headstones. This is 2014. 16. I've lost time. And we had no more wall space. So we built another wall. And that wall we just dedicated. And in addition to the wall, we took every single stone that we could find and we rescued it. And you can see there's the second wall, and the bed at the bottom is for the crushed fragments. Every piece of headstone was saved. Once again, we had the ceremonies with the kids. And my cousin Zvika had the city of Gedera send 125 kids from Gedera to meet with their counterparts in Novi Dwar. They've done it 3 times now. Now remember, these are Polish kids who hadn't seen Jews growing up. And here we are. They're playing ball. They're singing. They're becoming friends, and they're understanding who they are. This was in 2014. That's a mixture of Polish and Israeli kids. That was my dad during the years that he was fighting. The deniers, I don't know if you remember when Joseph Mroz came here and they were picketing Exodus when it first came out. And he was in the lead of the anti-protesting the protesters. My dad was a dedicated husband, father, grandfather. He was a very gentle man. He only wanted others to be taken care of. He would literally give you the shirt off his back, and I've seen him do it. He was most happy when you were happy. That made him happy. And I think we've honored him with what we've done. So where do we go from here? We're continuing trying to get foundation grants because it does take money to cut the grass, keep it clean, and we're looking to create an endowment so we can just draw on the interest to have it done. The city can't do it because they have to take care of all the other cemeteries. Grabowski cuts it again, whatever his labor costs are, but he makes no margin on it. He's been very good to us. We'll keep looking for more headstones and make room for them. We're translating the records, and most important, we're continuing the tolerance contest and the kids coming and meeting with their counterparts. As a Bostonian, we all know Elie Wiesel. I was at BU when he was at BU. I think I took one class with him. I sat in on. He said, "My greatest disappointment is that I believe that those of us who went through the war and tried to write about it, about their experience, became messengers. We've given the message and nothing has changed." Actually, things have changed. They've gotten worse. In the Middle East, around the world, and sadly in our own country, where anti-Semitism, prejudice, and tolerance is again crawling out from the slime and from under the rocks, where it's been festering. It's always there. The danger is real, though. Think about the 6 million Jews and 5 million others who were murdered. And think about those who are killed in the Ukraine right now. And think about those in Mogadishu. And think about those in Afghanistan. How many teachers and doctors and scientists and musicians and artists and students like some of you were erased from the earth. How would the world have been different if the 6 million had lived? How would the world be different if the people who just died, the thousands and tens of who died in Ukraine, had lived? How would the world be different? Never forget. The world is forgotten right now. Never again. The only operative word is again, because never isn't there. So here we are. Ukraine, 2022. Poland, 1942. What's the difference? The bodies in 2022 are in plastic bags. That's the only difference. This could have been Babi Yar, it could have been Majdanek, it could have been Treblinka, and the hundreds of other camps. Right now, Ukrainians are being slaughtered for being Ukrainians like Jews were being slaughtered for being Jews. And in a turnaround, Poland has become a refuge for those who can get out of Ukraine when those came to Poland escaping Ukraine in the 1700s. This is Kasia, upper left, pushing the basket. My family has sent some money. Our friends have sent some money. We have to PayPal it. We send it right to her. And she buys groceries and goods. She's working with Mayor Kowalski on the kids, on taking care of the refugees. They filled every hotel in Novi Dwar with refugees. She's adopted 8 families herself. The Napoleonic fortress at Modlin, not Pomohovec, which is sort of a monument, they've taken the barracks and converted them to housing. The kids are in the schools. Everybody has temporary ID cards so they can get jobs and get transportation. Lower right, those are Novi Dwar kids packaging food. On the left, those are Ukrainian kids. Martin Luther King also went to school around the corner from us. That is the most powerful thing in the context of what we're saying. Everything Hitler did in Germany was legal. Well, Putin thinks everything he's doing is legal because he's making the laws. King also said the ultimate tragedy is not the oppression and the cruelty of bad people, but the silence over that by the good people. That's the problem. Change, as I said earlier, King said human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice and suffering and struggle and the tireless exertion and passionate concern of dedicated individuals. Never forget. Never again? No. Remember. Zachor. You have to remember. Come on. So there's Bartok again. I had to repeat it because it's burned in my mind. I can't get it out of my head. It should resonate with all of you. Never forget. Never again. Remember. There you see the partisans in the Vilna ghetto, or in Vilna. And that was the family that was there 2 times ago when we were there. And we have cousins from Australia, from Israel, and from here, and from Texas. And Zach, who is shorter than he is now. If my dad had not survived, almost no one would be in that picture. I, my kids, my grandkids, my brothers, their children, their grandchild, would not be here. We would never have been born. The fact that we are here is just another testimony to my dad's strength and that of the Jewish people to survive these past 5,000 years. You see the last stanza of the partisan song. The partisans were the Jews who lived in the forest and fought the Nazis as best they could. They did not run. This was written before the end of the war, of the Holocaust, in brazen defiance by those who were slated for total extermination by the Nazi world. But the story is sadly not over. Come on. Come on, come on. It's the last slide. Please do this. Josh, can you get me up there? It's deciding not to work. Thank you. Well, it's supposed to say remember, but that's okay. There we go. More than 50 years ago, this is part of what I talked to the kids about at BU, Nancy and I marched down Columbus Ave with Martin Luther King. We protested the Vietnam War. That's okay. That means there's life in the room. It's wonderful. We have a dear friend, a Chabad rabbi, and when that happens at his services, he just quells. Of course, they have a lot of kids. We protested the Vietnam War with all-night teach-ins, marches down Comm Ave to the Boston Common. We fought for voting rights. We mentored kids from the projects, and so much more. And here today, we're still at it. Never forget, never again. Look at the world around you. Again, as we all said, we've given the message and nothing has changed. He said in Night, if you've read Night, his memoir, for in the end it is all about memory, its sources and its magnitude, and of course its consequences. As Santayana said, you know, those who don't remember history are doomed to repeat it. So, to the young ones in this room, there are a couple of you here. I hope there are a bunch of you on the on Zoom. We've done our thing. It's your turn. Get out there. Don't let what's going on go on by itself. You will make a difference. You can make a difference. You have to make a difference. I don't know. You know, we tried hard, and we didn't. We failed, frankly. The world is the way it is because we failed to stand up for everything we believe for. It's your turn. Don't mess it up. Thank you. Any questions? I can spend a few more minutes, or you want to go home?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for all you do.
Thank you. Josh, anybody on Zoom?
We have time for a question or two if there's anybody who wants to share. David, I just want to tell you from somebody on Zoom that they said this is the most powerful presentation on the Holocaust that they've ever seen.
Absolutely.
Really? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, if there are no questions, that's my granddaughter and her friend. Thank you all so much. Rabbi, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Really.
If you want me to come back someday, I'll come back someday.
I think this is really important for everybody to hear, but I think especially young people. I think I'm glad that there were people here tonight. I think your determination to make right what was done wrong and to make sure that the next generation really understands what is their responsibility to do is very inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you
for
very
being
much.
here.
Take care. I'll get unmiked. Yeah.
I want to actually just conclude tonight with Kiddush and Motzi. I don't like to cry in public. You know, I like to cry in my own private space, but a lot of what you said really brought me to tears. It was very emotional. I know people here must have heard it multiple times. And I think the immensity of the loss, the immensity of the possibilities that were never realized is overwhelming. And there's a tremendous grief that goes along with it. And our sacred calendar gives us times to acknowledge that and to remember that. And also, it's a time after we've done that to return to life and to remember that those of us who are here are able to live, are able to continue to resist and to fight and to create a better world, and also to experience the joys and happiness that exist. And so I want to just conclude with Kiddush and Motzi and to sanctify Shabbat, and then people are welcome to stick around and schmooze, grab a little sip of wine on the way out, to grab a slice of challah. If you have your prayer books, we will be on page 5. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pari hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho b'ahavadu v'ratzon hinchilanu, zikaron l'maaseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila l'mikra'e kodesh, zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim. Kivanu v'acharta, v'yotanu kidashta, mikol hamim, v'shabbat kodshecha, v'yahavadu v'ratzon, hinchaltanu, baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh ha-Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Shabbat shalom, David. Thank you so much.